Okay. Good evening, everybody. My name is Kiran Kumar Vissa. I'm one of the steering group members of ASHA, and I have the pleasure of anchoring this session, which many of you must be looking forward to, because we'll be hearing from Shri Devinder Sharma, who is a very sought after speaker, and I've just had at least 5 or 6 people tell me in the corridor that, okay, Devinder Sharma, I follow him on Twitter, I follow him on Facebook. Really excited to hear him. And we'll also hear from Ms. Nandini Jayaram, who is a farmer leader from Karnataka. She is a leader from KRRS. She's also a farmer herself and has represented the farmers' voices in many international fora. We'll also hear from her. So that is going to be the event for for the next 1.5 hours. The theme is economic security for farmers, economic security for farming households. That is the theme. And without much ado, I would like to invite Devinder ji and Nandini Jayaram ji to please come onto the stage. So Devinder ji is somebody who actually doesn't need an introduction for this audience. Hello. But he is a very well respected journalist, policy analyst, somebody who started out as a journalist, covering farmers' issues in the field, and also not just reporting on the situation of farmers and what they are facing, but also analyzing what various economic policies mean for the farmers from the time of, when the WTO and things like that were in the discussion, all the macroeconomic things, how they impact the farmers. And he has also been a voice of farmers in the sense that I think he also would not disagree if I describe him as an activist, along with being a journalist and policy analyst, really taking up the cause of farmers. And while being an activist for the cause of farmers, he's also been a voice for ecological agriculture, for seed rights, and bringing issues like that into the center stage. So very glad to have Devinder ji here at the ASHA Kisan Swaraj Sammelan. And Nandini Jayaram ji, like I was saying, is a farmer leader from KRRS, Karnataka Rajya Raita Sangha, Karnataka, and been a voice of farmers in various international fora also. She's a practicing farmer herself, so we'd like to hear from her also about economic security for farming households. Just a couple of announcements before we begin the session. After this will be immediately followed by the launching of a seed exchange portal, which many of the people involved in ASHA and B Swaraj Manch have all put together. And that will be followed by giving away the Vavilov and Richaria Award to 2 prominent seed conservators. So that will be the program immediately after this session. Following that, actually, there will be also a cultural program, a Bharatanatyam performance. This was supposed to happen on the stage, where the food stalls are also there, but because of the rain, it cannot happen on that stage. It's become slushy. So that performance also will be here around 8:25 also it will start. And after that, we request you to move for dinner. Since this is the penultimate day of the Sammelan, please bear with us for a slightly longer program and a slight delay in your dinner, but I think you'll enjoy all the programs which are there for this evening.
ಕನ್ನಡದಲ್ಲಿ ಹೇಳ್ಬಿಡ್ತೀನಿ. ಈ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮ ಆದ ನಂತರ ಇದ್ರ ಜೊತೆಗೇನೆ ಬೀಜ ವಿನಿಮಯ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮ ಇರುತ್ತೆ RRA ನೆಟ್ವರ್ಕ್ ಅವರಿಂದ, ಮತ್ತು ವ್ಯಾವಿಲೋ ರಿಚಾರಿಯಾ ಅವಾರ್ಡ್ ಅದು ಕೂಡ ಈ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮದ ನಂತರ ಅದು ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ಅದಾದಮೇಲೆ ಸಾಂಸ್ಕೃತಿಕ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮ ಇದೆ. ಸೊ ಇದಕ್ಕೆಲ್ಲರೂ ಕೂಡ ಇರಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಕೇಳ್ಕೊಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀವಿ. ಊಟ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ತಡವಾಗುತ್ತೆ ರಾತ್ರಿದು. ಕೆಲವ್ರು ಹೋಗಲೇಬೇಕು ಅರ್ಜೆಂಟಾಗಿದೆ ಅನ್ನೋರು ಹೋಗ್ಬೋದು, ಆದರೆ ಇಲ್ಲಾಂದರೆ ಹೆಚ್ಚಿನವರು ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಇರಬೇಕು ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮ.
So So just a brief introduction, a few thoughts, from my side and from Asha's side on about this session, about the theme of this session. It is about economic security for farming households. And as we have seen, this Sammelan has been a celebration of the rich diversity of ecological agriculture, the seed conservation, the various, farmers working across the country in building a different model of agriculture from what we see in the mainstream. In Asha's framework of thinking about agriculture, we, right from the time when we did the Kisan Swaraj Yatra in 2010, we came up with this framework of Kisan Swaraj Niti, which has 4 pillars: ecological agriculture and diverse agroecology is one of the pillars, which is very important for the future of agriculture as we see it. And economic security for all farming households is another important pillar. And also social justice and rights over resources for all the different sections which are involved in farming is also another important pillar. And availability of nutritious and diverse food for everybody, which brings in the entire country, the entire society into the problems and issues of agriculture and food systems. So these are the 4 pillars of Kisan Swaraj as we see it in ASHA. So this economic security is a very important element of the whole thing. So one may question, why are we talking about economic security separately? Will not shifting to ecological agriculture, which will reduce our dependence on external inputs, make agriculture economically sustainable by itself? So I think that's a very important question. I think it will be good if we dwell a little bit on that. Definitely in the sense of reducing the input costs of agriculture, reducing the dependence on external inputs, which is the model of agriculture that we are promoting. Definitely it will lead to a better economic sustainability in agriculture. But while we are talking about making such changes at an individual level, at an individual farmer and practices level, we also know that there is a larger system outside which is pushing a certain model of agriculture, because of which, unless the larger system also changes, individual farmers would find it very difficult to change their model of agriculture. That's why we had a session in the morning which was talking about how agroecology can be scaled up through state government interventions, through various kind of a planned interventions, right? So similarly, just like there is a Green Revolution model of agriculture practices which we are saying should be changed, there is also a larger economic model. There is a larger economic model of development which is there, which actually is meant to make small farmers disappear altogether. So the larger economic model, which the world over in many of the so-called developed countries has been followed, has actually pushed small farmers to the margins or disappear altogether, and replace that with factory farming, with mechanized farming, with large corporations doing agriculture rather than small farmers doing agriculture. So this economic model is also very much tied with the Green Revolution agriculture model of practices and so on. So these things have to be seen by us in an integrated way. And unless the larger economic model is also challenged, and we make sure that small farmer economic sustainability is also placed at the center of whatever future for agriculture that we imagine, then even our ecological models that we are talking about may only remain in one corner while the rest of the agriculture becomes corporate agriculture. So that's the reality that we are facing. That is the reason why even a network like ASHA, which is focused on ecological agriculture in a major way, also had to respond when the 3 farm laws were brought in by the central government a couple of years ago. Because what these 3 farm laws represent is actually taking agriculture away from small farmers, from marginal farmers, and placing it completely in the hands of corporates and agri-businesses. So unless we understand the larger picture also, our battles of whether it's ecological farming or seed rights or various resource rights that we are talking about, will also be endangered. That is the reason why it's very important for us to discuss those issues also. And just like we are swimming against the tide in the ecological agriculture front, in a way, sustaining small farmers' livelihoods is also swimming against the tide in the larger economic model that we are all in, and that has to be really challenged. And that's the reason why this kind of a struggle against corporatization of agriculture, against things like WTOs and free trade agreements that the government is trying to sign. I think even as we speak, there is an accelerated process for signing a free trade agreement with UK, with United Kingdom, so that they get a better market for their agricultural produce in India. Meanwhile, that is going to affect the livelihoods of small farmers here in a very big way. And issues like minimum support price are also something that we need to engage with, because ultimately, when we talk about MSP, we are not talking about just minimum support price for two crops like rice and wheat or cotton or something, and which is the way that actually the system has worked, so that they have swamped a lot of other crops and the whole crop diversity in the country. We are talking about a fair price for all the crops that the farmers grow. And that fair price for all the crops need to be there as a right to the farmers, because the whole economic model is built on devaluing the work that people do in the fields, devaluing our soil fertility, devaluing the contribution of the whole nature in terms of producing. So the primary production itself is devalued, and only secondary tertiary production is valued. If that is the economic model, then farmers are not going to get a fair price. So our demand for a better, higher MSP or an implementation of a guaranteed MSP is also about demanding that there should be a fair price for the labor of the farmers, fair price for what we produce from the earth. So these are all the questions which are tied in terms of our demand for an economic security for farmers. Similarly, we are talking about climate change. When there are natural disasters happens, what happens to the farmers who lose their crop for no fault of theirs? What are the systems that are in place to ensure that there is a minimum risk coverage for the farmers? So these are all the kind of important issues that we need to engage with respect to ensuring the economic sustainability of farming, which is very closely tied in with the ecological sustainability as well as rights over natural resources. So this is the framework in which we are thinking. So I thought it will be good to have that short introduction. And now I invite Dr. Devinder Sharma to give his lecture. Thank you.
Thank you, Kiran Vissaji, my co-panelist on the dais. And I know there are lots of distinguished people in this audience today. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Today, before I begin, I want to share with you that sometimes when history is to be written in future, I believe the movement that has spread in this country for last 5-10 years, the movement towards agroecology, the movements towards moving away from chemicals to non-chemical farming, I think would be written in history. And all of you deserve a round of applause for all that you have done to place a new chapter in global history, and also for the future of agriculture as well as farming. Now, why I'm saying this is because increasingly the world has begun to realize that we need to radically overhaul. We need to move towards ecological transformation of agriculture. You know, as was said by somebody in the morning, that the biggest mindset that we have to challenge is the mindset that believes that food cannot be grown without chemicals. And I think you people have demonstrated it, and demonstrated it conclusively with a lot of evidence that this is possible. In fact, this is the future. But there is one alarming situation that we have encountered over the years. You put in so much of effort. You put in so much of your family labor. You work against all odds. And at the end of the day, what you earn is only a pittance. Kabhi sochiye, let's think about it. Why is it that despite all your efforts, money, and all the kinds of involving your family, labor, and so on, ultimately what you produce, as I said, is just a pittance? There must be some reason behind it. You know, when you buy a pen, tomorrow when you go to the market, you buy a pen, it has a price tag. You buy a chappal, it has a price tag. You buy medicines, it has a price tag. You buy a motorcycle, it has a price tag. You buy a car, it has a price tag. Why is it only the agriculture produce does not have a price tag? We all need to understand that why is it that only agriculture, whether it is tomato, wheat, or whatever you are cultivating, does not come with a price tag? Why? Let's start thinking on that line. And more you think about it, more you realize how the entire global design has been cast. You know, everything that industry produces comes with a price. But everything that a farmer produces is without a price. And then we believe it is left to the market forces, and market forces are the best judge of what the total output or commodity pricing is, and they are the ones who will determine the price. Why doesn't it happen for others? When did you hear that the number of cars that a company has is more than, or they have not been able to sell? Will they reduce the price? It has never happened. Why do we expect only the agriculture prices to come back or come down? I think this is a question that we all as farmers need to ask. And we need to ask not only to ourselves, but also I think we need to now change the global narrative to say that farmer also deserves a price tag for his produce. Let's be very clear. You cannot leave a tomato or bangan or whatever you produce, gobi or mooli or whatever, to the market forces. There has to be a price for it. I remember when the farmers were protesting outside New Delhi for 1 year or more than that, you know, an American farmer gave me a call. He said, "Sir, please explain me what is happening in your country. Why are the farmers protesting?" So when I explained to him that the farmers are protesting because they have been faced with a kind of economic insecurity or injustice all these decades, and so they are actually raising their voice that we too deserve a rightful price is what they are asking for, which eventually translates into what should be the rightful income that a farming family should get. You know, his answer was, well, that is what we have also been fighting for. When I said, why do you say? I think the impression in India is that the American farmers are well off. They are doing much better, and we need to copy the American farmers. In reality, if you look at the American farmers, they are suffering with the same kind of distress that we in India suffer. This is something we need to understand. We need to understand the same market forces that the country was very excited to bring into this country in the form of 3 laws is what has actually devastated agriculture, not only in America, not only in Canada, not only in Europe, but across the globe. Markets have played havoc with agriculture. Now, this farmer who called me up, he said, "Sir, my father," and in the barn that he was sitting there, my father, he said, has put a small note on the notice board where he said that in 1970, I'm talking of 1970, 50 years back, he said, my father had sold corn at the rate of $3.2 per bushel. Bushel is 27 kilos. So 27 kilos of corn, his father had sold at $3.2 per bushel, and he said, in 2020, "Sir, I sold corn, and the best price I got was $3 per bushel." This was less than what my father had got in 50 years back in 1970. And he said that, you know, in America, farmer is born in debt and he dies in debt, something that is very peculiar in India also. A farmer is born in debt, and we know that he dies in debt. And what he said goes a little bit beyond what Chaudhry Charan Singh used to say, that Bharat ka kisan karze mein paida hota hai, karze mein marta hai. And he said was that, sir, if anybody wants to know what hell is or what a living hell is, be a farmer. To live all through your life in debt is hell. And those who have undergone that, they only know what hell is all about. So ladies and gentlemen, I think we need to understand that whether you are farming in America or whether you are farming in Mysuru, the fact of the matter is we are all faced with the same kind of economic insecurity, which has actually pushed farmers towards not only a gallows for themselves, putting a gallows around their neck, but also abandoning agriculture and moving out of farming. Now, this is not something that is happening just by way of the nature of things. No, it is part of an economic design. It is sad when the former governor of Reserve Bank of India says that the best reforms in India would be when, farmers are forced to quit agriculture and move to the cities because cities need cheap labor. And my challenge at that time was, if you are forcing people to quit agriculture, even if he has a small land holding, because that is his income security or his economic security, you want him to quit that job and move into the cities to become a landless labor or dihadi mazdoor, and then you call it employment generation, I think the entire economics need to be re-looked at. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we are setting that stone where we can all now think or now rethink that how to redesign the kind of economics that the world is faced with. Now, in this all 40, 50 years, something that I have been talking very loudly, I want to repeat that again to you. In the year 2016, when the government announced that we will double the farmers' income in the next 5 years, a question that I was asked on that day on the media was, what is the farmer's income today? So everyone was asking this question, what is the farmer's income today? 2 days before the budget is announced or budget is presented, the finance minister presents what is called as in a note which gives us an official picture of this country's economy. And in that plus picture, it was very clearly mentioned that the average income of a farming family, and I'm quoting from the official document, and which says that the average income of a farming family in 17 states of India, which means roughly half the country, is rupees 20,000 a year. This is economic data of the government of India. 20,000 rupees a year means less than 1,700 rupees a month. Those of us who farm, I'm sure you will agree, I cannot dream of raising a cow in 1,700 rupees a month. I can't even figure out how those people in half the country, farmers in half the country, survive in 1,700 rupees per month. I think we all need to think about it. That tells you very clearly that over the years, what has happened to Indian agriculture is before us. After all, you put so much of labor and your hard work, and eventually at the end of the day, if that is what you have to earn, why should the younger people stay in agriculture? Wherever I go into the universities to speak, the question I'm asked is, well, the younger people are not interested in agriculture, so they are moving out. Obviously, if my father is earning 2,000 rupees a month, why should my son continue with the same kind of profession? So he's moving out. So let's be very clear, because we denied him the rightful income, he has no other option but to quit agriculture and become a kind of a landless labor or the dihadi mazdoor in the cities. That's a phenomenon which economists rejoice. I'm surprised many economists in this country feel very happy when they hear the reports that farmers are being, let's say, migrating from the villages to the cities. I remember some years back, many years back now, in fact, Norman Borlaug is a name that you all remember. Norman Borlaug is considered to be the father of the Green Revolution. And I, at that time, used to be with the Indian Express. And my newspaper had asked me, as being an agriculture correspondent, that whenever Borlaug is in India, you must travel with him. And I must acknowledge that it was a wonderful experience for me to travel with Borlaug whenever he would come to India. And I vividly recall that we were sitting at Pantnagar University in the 80s, and I asked him a question. I said, the 1983 World Peace Prize has gone to somebody called as Lech Walesa. Walesa was a Polish workers leader, Poland's workers leaders, and he got the Nobel Prize. So my question to Borlaug was, Dr. Borlaug, since you were an earlier recipient of the Peace Prize, why do you and how do you see this award that has gone on to Walesa? Sometimes the question is so apt. And he asked me, he came back to me and said, Devinder, I'm glad you asked me this question. Because the Nobel Committee had set up a small team of people to go to Poland to find out whether he deserves a Nobel Prize or not. That committee was led by Nobel laureate Norman Borlaug. He says, when I went to Poland to see, and this man, Walesa, was a worker solidarity movement. He was leading a big campaign in the country, a lot of protest happening. He says, when I went there, I realized what Walesa was fighting for was cheaper food for the workers. But in the bargain, he forgot what will happen to those millions of people who produce that cheap food. And therefore, Borlaug's recommendation to the Nobel Committee was that Walesa does not deserve a Nobel Prize. And yet he got a Nobel Prize. Because the dominant economic thinking is that food price has to be kept low. The entire economic reforms are built on keeping farmer food prices low, which means paying less to farmers. That is the global design. I think we never understood it. We never understood it, how the design has been cast to bear the consequences to what you and me are living with. So ladies and gentlemen, I think it is an opportunity for us to now understand that how the bigger picture, unless we understand that bigger picture, we will never be able to ascertain why the farmer in your neighborhood or somewhere close to you is dying or is suffering, indiscriminate kind of a tragedy that the agriculture sector is undergoing. This was one picture that would tell you how badly the policies are designed against the sector, the agriculture sector. The other part is, if you look at between the period 2000 and 2016, it is a 16-year period, a study done by OECD. OECD is the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the world's richest trading bloc, along with a New Delhi NGO called ICRIER. They did a study, and they said in between 2000 and 2016, in 16-year period, Indian farmers lost 45 lakh crore. Did you ever hear that? Indian farmers lost 45 lakh crore in a period of 16 years, which means every year the Indian farmers were suffering a loss of 2.64 lakh crore. There was no debate on television. I didn't find a debate happening in the media. I didn't find Parliament discussing such a huge crisis that Indian agriculture was suffering from. We just take it for granted. So what? Farmers ko hua hai na. Imagine if 5,000 crore ka bhi loss agar industry ko hota, if industry had suffered 5,000 crore losses, there would have been a kind of a halla-gulla on the TV that we are living through policy paralysis, government must come out with a bailout package or come up with a kind of incentives to industry. But because it happened to agriculture, nobody bothered in this country. And I think you and me, both of us, we have to really strive to understand how the entire thing is built against you. We may not understand today, but I think we have to look for our generation, future generation, your own children who are unable to really make agriculture into a viable occupation. Why? Because the entire design is such that the industry can ruthlessly exploit agriculture or farmers. Now, interestingly, the economists tell us that the best way forward is you reduce the number of farmers in agriculture. You would have heard it again and again. Now, let's look at that also. In India, there are about 50% of the population is farmers. Let's say about 60 crore people are dependent on farming in India. So the Planning Commission, or what is now called the Niti Aayog, says that today the rate of migration is 1.8%. When the rate of migration increases to 2.4%, which means migration from the rural to the urban areas, they say that the income of the farmers will double in India. And we all would agree with that. because we believe that agriculture is overstuffed and we have large number of people underemployed in agriculture. So we need to move people out of agriculture. This is what America did, this is what Europe did, and this is what the developing countries are being asked to do now. Let us look at America. America is today only 1.5% population is left in farming. 1.5% would be a dream for India's planners. They would always dream कि हमारे भी देश में just 1.5% people remain in agriculture. I can see that happening every other day when I look at the media or the news reports or the economic conferences that I go to. But sadly, what is not known is the income of American farmers should have gone up. I'm sure you will agree, with only 1.5% people left in agriculture, their income should have gone up phenomenally very high. But the fact of the matter is, in 2020, when Donald Trump was fighting elections, in America, the American farmers who get subsidy after every 5 years, under what is called as a food bill, they get a subsidy every 5 years, yet they faced a bankruptcy of $425 billion. Farmers were living under a bankruptcy of $425 billion in America. And studies say in America, the people who commit suicide in the rural areas, their number is 45% higher than the people who commit suicide in the urban areas. Now, this is in a country where we thought that lesser the number of people, their income should have gone up. But it happened the other way around. Then if you look at Europe, Europe is one country where, except for France, most of the countries have hardly any population now left in agriculture. England has less than 1% of the population left in agriculture. France also has about 3% now, and so on and so forth if you just see in France. But interestingly, the fact of the matter is, either in America or in Europe, what has not been clearly understood, or what we have failed to understand and which we have failed to echo, is the fact that in both the countries, whatever income the farmers are getting today is essentially because the government supports or the government provides enough subsidy to jack up their income. To example, in America, 45% of the farmers' income is coming from subsidies. In Europe, 50% of the farmers' income today in Europe is coming from subsidies. In our countries, governments, whether you are in India or whether in some other developing country, the governments have no money for agriculture. So obviously, we have been left to fend for ourselves, whereas in those countries, they are being provided with abundant subsidies and incentives to see that they at least remain viable, or they at least remain on the farm. Now, the point I'm trying to make is, if market reforms have failed America, they have failed in Europe and so on, how do we believe that they will succeed in India? Then another folly, I think, which I need to clear. Most of us, in many of our discussions, would tend to agree that in India, 86% of the farmers are small farmers, which means they'll own less than 5 acres of land. So we all believe, it is not possible to make agriculture viable from 5 acres or less than that. We all agree, we will all nod our heads. But what is happening in the bigger land holdings? Why is it that in America, where the average landholding size is 444 acres, the farmers are not viable, the economics is not working? In India, it may be just 5%. And we all tend to believe, no, 5% is too small a kind of a viable landholding size, and so farmers have to either quit, or they need to aggregate, or they need to join hands. Well, let us look at Australia. Australia is one country which has about 25,000 farmers. It has the average landholding size in Australia is a dream for Indian planners. It is 14,000 acres per farm is the size in Australia. 14,000 acre अगर किसी किसान के पास area है, I'm sure you will agree that the size is so big, or the upscaling that we all talk about is already happening in Australia. Given the 14,000 acres that one farmer has in Australia, I think the farmer should be dictating the markets. अगर मार्केट्स एग्रीगेट करने से उसका जो आपका जो उसका अपस्केलिंग करने से आप यू आर एबल टू have a price or play a role in the pricing, then please tell me in country like Australia, where farmers already have 14,000 acres of land as an average land holding size, they should be dictating the market price. But look at what has happened in Australia. In the last 30 years in Australia, 25% of the farms have closed down. The rate of suicide in Australian agriculture is double than what it is in the urban areas in Australia. This is in a country where the landholding size is 14,000 acres. Imagine, I think we can't even dream of. This is essentially because of the design. आप छोटे किसान हो या बड़े किसान हो, the way it has been designed, you will face the consequences of getting into agriculture or being in agriculture. So ladies and gentlemen, I think the challenge before us is to understand how can a country like India, a future population in agriculture which will be coming up or which will stay in agriculture, we try to see that how it becomes sustainable for them, economically viable for them. One way of sustainability is agroecology. Now people have got a shock, people have got a kick in where they deserve it, that you have ensured that the kind of intensive agriculture is responsible for the climate change. A study in Nature Foods, one of the best and respectable scientific journal on food, it has worked out that the greenhouse gas emissions from agriculture is 34%. Which means 1/3 of the global greenhouse gas emission is coming from agriculture, and it is coming from agriculture because we are into intensive farming. Whether you use pesticides or chemical or whatever, we are adding on to the global greenhouse gas emission. If we really want to get out of it, we have no other choice now. We have to move towards agroecological farming system. And that is why in the beginning I said, ladies and gentlemen, you don't even know what kind of a history that you are creating, or the people in generations later would remember you all for taking that initiative. Now, having said that, I think the second part, which is more important, is how do we make agriculture economically viable for all of us to stay back into farming. And I want to go to a stage where we find that the farmers who are driving a rickshaw in the cities or are working as guards in the cities, they leave their job and abandon their job and go back and do farming again. That is the kind of agriculture this country needs, and for which we need to have a viable structure for income. अब ये कैसे होगा? How will that happen that, we need to provide farmers with a kind of assured income or guaranteed income? It has often been said by the governments that, the best azadi or the best freedom for the farmer is that he can go and sell anywhere in the country. No. That is not the freedom. I think the freedom is when the markets come closer to you. What we need is actually to ensure that every 5-kilometer radius in India, we have a mandi. We have a regulated mandi that ensures that the distress that we face in agriculture is reduced to the minimum. I think that is the kind of model. So we already have about 7,000 mandis in this country. We need to have 42,000 mandis if we spread out in 5-kilometer radius. Secondly, I think we must be very clear that, like I said in the beginning, when you go and buy a pen, it comes with a price tag. When you buy a car, it comes with a price tag. We need a price tag for agriculture produced now. And that can come only, ladies and gentlemen, the price tag can come only from minimum support price. That is why from the very beginning of farmers' protest that was happening around New Delhi, we have been standing up and saying what this country needs is actually a fourth law. Fourth law, which ensures that minimum support price becomes a legal entity for all crops. I'm not talking of only wheat and rice, which has brought the culture or which has brought the focus on surplus food that the country produces, and there are people who are raising fingers on that. But I would like to look at a kind of agriculture where all the 23 crops for which prices are announced today in this country, that should be made a legally acceptable document, which means it becomes a benchmark below which no trading takes place in this country. चाहे वो ट्रेडर हो, चाहे वो फार्मर हो, चाहे वो procurement agency हो, whatever it is, everybody, it should be becoming legal that you will not buy below that minimum support price. Don't worry. There would be people who would scare you. Oh, the government will have to spend 17 lakh crore and so on and so forth. We have heard those kind of figures that are tossed to us and we tend to believe it. Ladies and gentlemen, we have done the analysis. One of the persons who is doing the analysis is sitting here right with us, Professor T.N. Prakash. His analysis shows us that we would require roughly close to 2 lakh crore additional every year if we were to provide farmers with a minimum benchmark price. And that is what is coming from here, but there are also studies in Punjab which tell us very clearly that if we were to provide farmers, every farmer with a minimum support price, and I'm not asking the government only to buy it, I'm saying everyone should be ensured that they don't buy below that price, is 1 to 1.5 lakh crore. So we know this is the kind of quantum of money that we might have to spend, but 1.5 lakh crore, look at the 7th Pay Commission. What did the 7th Pay Commission cost us? कभी हमने पूछा 7वां पे कमीशन जब आया था, what did it cost the government? 7th Pay Commission was supposed to benefit the pensioners as well as the salary people who were getting these salaries. 7th Pay Commission was meant for about 5 to 6% of the population which is involved in the organized government's job security or whatever they need to look forward to. You know, a study done by Credit Suisse had said, Satma Vetan Ayog, when it will be implemented across the country by all states and PSUs and so on and so forth, the additional expenditure would be 4.5 to 4.8 lakh crore. 4.5 to 4.8 lakh crore money going to only in the hands of a handful of people. I have no problems with that. Please do it. But the fact of the matter is कि जब industry बोलती है कि 7th Pay Commission आने से the country will be into a booster dose क्योंकि demand बढ़ेगी तो economic growth होगी, so that is a kind of funda they create, and so they tell us that that would lead to a booster dose. Ladies and gentlemen, if the entire 50% population of the country, if they get an MSP and nothing below that, believe me, the kind of economic security that we would generate, or the kind of economics that we would generate, with the demand going up number of times, compared to what the 7th Pay Commission did, we will actually be saying not a booster dose for the economy, but a rocket dose for the economy. More the money in their hands, more the people will spend in the market. And then the circle of development runs. So let's be very clear that the economists also need to understand, and I think you all have a role to play there, build up a narrative that the economists try to stand to accept or will gradually accept. Because so far they have gone up with that economics 101 thinking, or what they were taught in the university level, which said that there is no other alternative but to move people from agriculture into the urban areas, which we need to go for economic growth. No. In fact, my thinking is, if we do the reverse, move these people out of, look at Bangalore. I come to Bangalore, you may be very proud, those of you living there. But I think, wow, if that is what you are looking as the future, I think the future is doomed. Let's be very clear, the future stands doomed. And the water crisis that you had, the flood crisis that you had, I think in the days to come, you will see what will happen to almost all the cities of the country. I think what we need to move people out of the people who have migrated from the rural to the urban areas. We need to take them back, and it can only happen if agriculture becomes economically viable and profitable. So ladies and gentlemen, the choice before the world and the choice before the country is, if you really want to keep the 50% of the population, I'm talking of 50% because these are the people who are directly or indirectly involved with agriculture. But I think even if you look at the rural economy, that it will benefit, the percentage may be 70% or so. But the fact of the matter is, we need to provide farmers with an assured and guaranteed income. I can tell you one thing, that the farmers globally now, and I'm not talking of India only, farmers globally, I have been having, and I still continue to have, Zoom discussion with farmer leaders across the world, and they are asking me something which I should share with you. They say that what the Indian farmers are wanting as guaranteed price is actually what the American farmers have been asking as income parity. The term may be different. Income parity for America and guaranteed price for Indian farmers, the meaning is the same. They also want, American farmers also want an assured and guaranteed price. In fact, they also came with thousands of tractors into Washington, D.C. in the time when Jimmy Carter was the president. And they at that time were wanting income parity. Jimmy Carter, despite being a farmer himself, failed to do that. And that is the consequences that future farming populations are undergoing in America. I don't think we really want to suffer that consequences any more further. And I think it is time now to take it back, whosoever, Jimmy Carter or Richard Nixon or whatever it is. I think the challenge should be to see that we provide farmers everywhere in the world with a guaranteed income. Ladies and gentlemen, the discussions that I am having with farmer leaders across the world is that we are all now reaching a consensus or agreeing to this point that minimum support price is the only way forward to provide farmers with a guaranteed price all over the world. I think what you have done in India, what you have established and shown that how to work out a minimum support price is the mechanism that farmers elsewhere also in the world are now accepting, and they believe that is the way forward. Spain of Europe is one country which in 2020 had actually reformed or amended its laws to now make it compulsory that anybody buying below the cost of production in Spain, and it is in agriculture, in livestock, in forest, and in fisheries, in all these sectors, anybody buying lower than the cost of production that is worked out in a country like Spain actually faces penalties. There are penalties for first time somebody who makes a mistake. There are penalties for 3 times, and there are penalties after that. And I see the biggest, the level that you achieve is 1 lakh euros penalty if you default 3 times. I think that's a kind of mechanism that India needs to adopt. In this conference, where we have all come to look at the huge diversity that is available, look at the appreciation for the kind of farming systems which are not only damaging to the environment, but also damaging to the human health, and the pathway that you are showing. In addition to this pathway, I think we also need to have a pathway to lead the world towards an economic security for farmers. In my understanding, therefore, ladies and gentlemen, the only way forward, you can come up with all kinds of permutation combination. Somebody will tell you, I have an FPO, so we will do this. Somebody will tell you, no, we are an aggregator, we do this. Somebody said, no, we are a corporate, we are very responsible, socially responsible, but we'll do it. I think if everyone is so willing to do it, then what is the harm in going for a minimum assured price? Why can't everyone then agree to provide farmers with a minimum guaranteed price? I think that is what the farmers are asking. So it is very clear for us, ladies and gentlemen, that the challenge we face today is enormous. The challenge we face today is huge because we are pitted against, sophisticated economists who will make you lose your track when they go on with the kind of jargons that they are used to. But the fact of the matter is, do not worry about these people. Do not worry about these people, because you are as was said repeatedly since today, you are the best economist. You are the best scientist. Your economy is in your hands. So come on, let's stand up and let us say that we will not accept anything below minimum support price as a guaranteed price. That should be the kind of ultimate message, I think, that farmers anywhere in the world or anywhere in this country need to now echo, or as it is said, become vocal for local. You are actually asking for vocal for, when you raise your voice, you are actually into that kind of a platform which is asking for vocal for local. And when you say local is a guaranteed price. That day when we have a guaranteed price all across the countries, ladies and gentlemen, that will be Kisan ki asli azadi. That will be Kisan ki asli azadi. Farmers, whether he is in Mysuru or whether he is in Punjab, I think wherever you are, you should at least have that feeling that after the harvest this year, when you go to the mandis, you will at least get a guaranteed price which is spread across the country in the same ratio. So that, I think, is the future that we must ascribe to. And therefore, I think the message that Kisan Sammelan is leading us to, or making us believe into, is that you are your own masters. You have faced the consequences of economics being designed by a lot of people outside the field. I think the responsibility and the challenge now for each one of you, the next time you hear an Indian economist, can be from University A or University B or C or from Niti Aayog, please ask him to come to your field and understand economics. शर्माइए नहीं, उनको बोलिए कि आइए, come stand with me and understand the real economic situation. And then let us try to redesign or work at what kind of economic structures we need to create. We need to look towards a country where agriculture also becomes in equal association or in equal relation, a similar kind of a player as the other industrial actors are. And I think agriculture is a sector which can transform the India's economy if we really focus our attention to see that the farmer in India is not only well paid, but is paid according to what he deserves or what he is entitled to. I think that is a factor which I think I leave behind to you, ladies and gentlemen, to grapple, to comprehend, to understand, and then raise a question. Don't worry if you say, no. What will I do if I raise a question? Who's going to listen to me? I remember Nelson Mandela had once said that the biggest tragedy of 21st century is that we have lost our anger. When I say anger, he said, I don't mean to say you go and plant a bomb. That is not anger. Anger is your ability to understand, to digest, to comprehend, and then to stand up and ask a question. Ladies and gentlemen, haven't we lost that anger? I think we need to rebuild anger. Come on, let's all join hands and invite these economies to teach them what economics is all about. And I think there lies the future for Indian agriculture and global agriculture. With that, I thank you all for this patient hearing. Thank you. Namaste. Jai Hind.
ಸುಮಾರು 5-10 ವರ್ಷಗಳಿಂದ ಏನು ಪರಿಸರ ಕೃಷಿ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಚಳುವಳಿ ನಡೀತಾ ಇದೆ ಈ ದೇಶದಲ್ಲಿ, ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ನೀವೆಲ್ಲ ಪಾಲ್ಗೊಂಡು ಒಂದು ಇತಿಹಾಸ ಬರಿತಾ ಇದ್ದೀರಾ. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನೆರೆದಿರೋರೆಲ್ಲರೂ ಕೂಡ ನಿಮಗೆ ಅಭಿನಂದನೆಗಳನ್ನ ಸಲ್ಲಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ ಅನ್ನೋ ಮಾತಿನ ಮೂಲಕ ತಮ್ಮ ಮಾತನ್ನು ಪ್ರಾರಂಭಿಸ್ತಾರೆ. ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ಮನಸ್ಥಿತಿ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತಾ, ಮನಸ್ಥಿತಿ ಬದಲಾದ್ರೇ ನಮಗೆ ಒಳ್ಳೆ ಕೃಷಿ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಮಾತಾಡೋಕ್ಕೆ ಸಾಧ್ಯ ಆಗತ್ತೆ, ರಾಸಾಯನಿಕವಿಲ್ಲದೆ ಕೃಷಿ ಮಾಡೋಕ್ಕೆ ಸಾಧ್ಯ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನು ನೀವು ತೋರಿಸ್ಕೊಟ್ಟಿದ್ದೀರಾ ಅನ್ನುವ ಮಾತನ್ನು ಕೂಡ ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ. ಕೃಷಿ ಉತ್ಪಾದನೆ ಏನಿದೆ ಅದರ ಬೆಲೆ ನಿಗದಿ ಮಾಡುವಂಥದ್ದು ಹಕ್ಕು ಯಾರಿಗಿರಬೇಕು? ರೈತರಿಗಿರಬೇಕು. ಈ ಹಕ್ಕನ್ನು ರೈತರು ಯಾವಾಗಲೂ ಕೂಡ ಇಟ್ಕೋಬೇಕು ಜೊತೆಯಲ್ಲಿ. ಆದರೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಚೌಧರಿ ಚರಣ್ ಸಿಂಗ್ ಅವ್ರು ಹೇಳ್ದಾಗೆ ಸಾಲದಲ್ಲೇ ಹುಟ್ಟುತ್ತಾರೆ, ಅದರಲ್ಲೇ ಸಾಯ್ತಾರೆ. ರೈತರ ಜೀವನ ಆ ರೀತಿ ಆಗೋಗ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದೆ. ಆದರೆ ಇದಕ್ಕೆ ಅರ್ಥ ಏನು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ, ಇದಕ್ಕೆ ಹೊಣೆ ನಮ್ಮ ರೈತರಲ್ಲ ಅಥವಾ ಈ ಕೃಷಿ ವ್ಯವಸ್ಥೆ ಇದಲ್ಲ. ಇದು ಆರ್ಥಿಕ ವಿನ್ಯಾಸ ಏನಿದೆ ಈ ನಮ್ಮ ದೇಶದಲ್ಲಾಗಿರ್ಬೋದು, ವಿಶ್ವದಲ್ಲಾಗಿರಬಹುದು, ಈ ರೀತಿಯೇ ಇದು ವಿನ್ಯಾಸ ಮಾಡಿರೋದ್ರಿಂದನೇ ಕೃಷಿ ಈ ರೀತಿ ಅಧೋಗತಿಗೆ ತಲುಪಿರೋವಂಥದ್ದು. ಈ ವ್ಯವಸ್ಥೆ ಏನು ಹೇಳುತ್ತೆ, ಈ ಆರ್ಥಿಕ ವ್ಯವಸ್ಥೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ, ಯಾರೆಲ್ಲ ಕೃಷಿ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀರಾ, ಹಳ್ಳಿಗಾಡಲ್ಲಿದ್ದೀರಾ, ಎಲ್ಲ ಕೃಷಿ ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಹೊರಗಡೆ ನಗರದಲ್ಲಿ ಬಂದು ದಿನಗೂಲಿಗಳಾಗಿ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡಿ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತಿರುವಂಥದ್ದು. ಈ ರೀತಿ ವಿನ್ಯಾಸ ಇದ್ದಾಗ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, ಉಸಿರುಗಟ್ಟಿರುವಂಥ ವಾತಾವರಣದಲ್ಲಿ ಕೃಷಿ ಮಾಡೋಕ್ಕೆ ಸಾಧ್ಯ ಆಗಲ್ಲ. ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ಆರ್ಥಿಕ ಚೌಕಟ್ಟು ಈ ರೀತಿಯಾಗಿದೆ. ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ಸರ್ಕಾರ 2016ರಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ಘೋಷಣೆ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ, ನಿಮಗೆ ದ್ವಿಗುಣ ಆದಾಯ ತರಿಸ್ಕೊಡ್ತೀವಿ ಅಂತ. ಈ ದ್ವಿಗುಣ ಆದಾಯ ಅಂದ ತಕ್ಷಣ ಖುಷಿ ಆಗಿಬಿಡ್ಬೇಕು ಜನರಿಗೆಲ್ಲ, ಹಂಗಾರೆ ರೈತರಿಗೆ ಇನ್ಮೇಲಿಂದ ತುಂಬ ಒಳ್ಳೆ ದಿನಗಳು ಬಂತು ಅಂತ. ಆದರೆ ನಾವು ಕೇಳಬೇಕಾಗಿರೋ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಏನು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ, ನಮ್ಮ ರೈತರಿಗೆ ಹಂಗಾರೆ ಇಷ್ಟು ವರ್ಷಗಳಿಂದ ಸರಾಸರಿ ಎಷ್ಟು ಆದಾಯ ಬರ್ತಿದೆ ಅಂತ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಕೇಳ್ಕೋಬೇಕಾಗಾದ್ರೆ, ಹಂಗಾರೆ 17 ಸರ್ಕಾರದ ಒಂದು ಅಂಕಿಅಂಶಗಳ ಪ್ರಕಾರನೇ 17 ರಾಜ್ಯಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಸುಮಾರು ವರ್ಷಕ್ಕೆ ಸರಾಸರಿ ಆದಾಯ ರೈತರಿಗಿರೋದು 20,000 ವರ್ಷಕ್ಕೆ, ಅಂದರೆ ತಿಂಗಳಿಗೆ 1,700 ರೂಪಾಯಿ. ಇದು ದ್ವಿಗುಣ ಆದರೆ ಬದುಕಕ್ಕೆ ಸಾಧ್ಯನಾ? ಸೊ ದ್ವಿಗುಣ ಅನ್ನೋ ಮಾತು ಇಂದಿನ ಆರ್ಥಿಕ ಪರಿಸ್ಥಿತಿಗೆ ನಾವು ಮಾತಾಡಬೇಕಾಗತ್ತೆ. ಮತ್ತು 1983ರಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ವಿಶ್ವಶಾಂತಿ ಪ್ರೈಸ್ ಅನೌನ್ಸ್ ಮಾಡಿದಾಗ ಒಬ್ರಿಗೆ ವಾರಿಸ್ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ನೊಬೆಲ್ ಪ್ರಶಸ್ತಿ ಸಿಕ್ಕತ್ತೆ ಅಂತ ಅನೌನ್ಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ. ಆಗ ನಾನೊಂದು ಪತ್ರಕರ್ತರ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತಾ ಅವ್ರನ್ನ ಕೇಳ್ತೀನಿ, ಯಾಕೆ ಇದು ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಕೊಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ, ಏನಕ್ಕಿದು ಅಂತ ಕೇಳಿದಾಗ, ಯಾಕಂದರೆ ಅವರು ಯಾವ ರೀತಿ ಡಿಸೈನ್ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತಿದ್ದಾರೆ, ಯಾವ ಒಂದು ಪಾಲಿಸಿ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ, ನಮ್ಮ ಆಹಾರದ ಬೆಲೆ ಏನಿದೆ ಅದು ಯಾವಾಗಲೂ ತುಂಬ ಕೆಳವಾಗಿಟ್ಟಿರಬೇಕು. ಅಂದರೆ ನೀನು ಆರ್ಥಿಕ ತುಂಬ ಸದೃಢವಾಗಿದೆ, ಗಟ್ಟಿಯಾಗಿದೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ನೀನು ಆಹಾರ ಬೆಲೆಯನ್ನು ಅತ್ಯಂತ ಕಡಿಮೆ ಆಗಿಟ್ಟಿರಬೇಕು. ಅಂಥದನ್ನು ಯಾರು ಎಕನಾಮಿಸ್ಟ್ ಆಗಿರ್ಬೋದು ಅವರು ಡಿಸೈನ್ ಮಾಡಿಕೊಡ್ತಾರೆ, ಅವರಿಗೆ ವಿಶ್ವದಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾನ್ಯತೆ ಸಿಕ್ಕತ್ತೆ ಅನ್ನೋದು. ಇನ್ನೊಂದು 2000ದಿಂದ 2016ವರೆಗೆ OECD ಅನ್ನುವ ಒಂದು ಅತ್ಯಂತ ಪ್ರತಿಷ್ಠಿತ ಸಂಸ್ಥೆ ಒಂದು ಅಧ್ಯಯನ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ. ಅದರ ಪ್ರಕಾರ ಭಾರತೀಯ ರೈತರು ಸುಮಾರು 45 ಲಕ್ಷ ಕೋಟಿ ಜನದ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತಿರ್ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ವರ್ಷದಲ್ಲಿ ಲಾಸ್ ಆಗೋದವ್ರಿಗೆ 45 ಲಕ್ಷ ಕೋಟಿ, ಈ 16 ವರ್ಷದಲ್ಲಿ ರೈತರಿಗೆ, ಭಾರತೀಯ ರೈತರಿಗೆ ಆಗಿರುವಂಥ ನಷ್ಟ 45 ಲಕ್ಷ ಕೋಟಿ, ಅಂದರೆ ವರ್ಷಕ್ಕೆ 2.6 ಲಕ್ಷ ಕೋಟಿ ಲಾಸ್ ಆಗಿದೆ ಅಂತ ಒಂದು ವರದಿ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ. ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ಸಣ್ಣ ಪ್ರಮಾಣದಲ್ಲಿ ಏನಾದರೂ ಒಂದು ಲಾಸ್ ಆಗಿದ್ದಂಥ ಇಂಡಸ್ಟ್ರಿಯವ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಮಾತಾಡಿದರೆ ಒಂದು ದೊಡ್ಡ ನ್ಯೂಸ್ ಆಗಿಬಿಟ್ಟು ಸರ್ಕಾರ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಏನೆಲ್ಲ ವ್ಯವಸ್ಥೆ ಮಾಡಿಕೊಡೋಕ್ಕೆ ಹೊರಡ್ತಿತ್ತು. ಆದರೆ ಕೃಷಿ ವಲಯಕ್ಕೆ ಇಷ್ಟು ನಷ್ಟ ಆಗಿದೆ ಅಂದಾಗ ಅದು ಸುದ್ದಿನೂ ಆಗೋದಿಲ್ಲ, ಸರ್ಕಾರಗಳನ್ನ ಅಲ್ಲೋಲ ಕಲ್ಲೋಲನೂ ಮಾಡೋಕ್ಕೆ ಹೋಗೋದಿಲ್ಲ. ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ನಮ್ಮ ದೇಶದಲ್ಲಿ ಸುಮಾರು 60 ಕೋಟಿ ಕುಟುಂಬಗಳು ಕೃಷಿಯಲ್ಲೇ ಅವಲಂಬಿತವಾಗಿರುವಂಥವು. ಆದರೆ ಅಮೆರಿಕ ದೇಶದಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಡಿ ಸುಮಾರು 1.5% ಅಷ್ಟು ಮಾತ್ರ ರೈತರು ಕೃಷಿಲಿ ತೊಡಗಿಸ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಆದರೆ ಭಾರತ ದೇಶದಲ್ಲಿ ಇದರ ಪ್ರಮಾಣ ತುಂಬ ದೊಡ್ಡದಾಗಿದೆ. ಹಾಗಾದರೆ ನಾವು ಅಮೆರಿಕ ಥರ ತಲುಪಕ್ಕೆ ಸಾಧ್ಯನಾ? ಆದರೆ ಬದುಕೋಕ್ಕಾಗತ್ತಾ? ಅಂದರೆ ಕೃಷಿ ಮಾಡೋರು ಕೇವಲ ಇಡೀ ಜನಸಂಖ್ಯೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಸುಮಾರು 1.5% ಆದರೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಭಾರತೀಯ ಜನರು ಏನಾಗಬೇಕು, ಕೃಷಿಕರು ಏನು ಬದುಕಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಒಂದು ಮುಖ್ಯವಾಗಿರೋ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಕೇಳಬೇಕಾಗತ್ತೆ. ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ಅಷ್ಟೇ ಸಣ್ಣ ಪ್ರಮಾಣದಲ್ಲಿ ರೈತರು ಇದ್ದರೂ ಕೂಡ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಸಿಗ್ತಾ ಇರೋಂಥ, ಅಮೆರಿಕದಲ್ಲಿ ಸಿಗ್ತಾ ಇರೋವಂಥ ರೈತರಿಗೆ ಸಬ್ಸಿಡಿ ಸಿಗ್ತಾ ಇರೋದು 45% ಅಷ್ಟು ಸಬ್ಸಿಡಿ ಸಿಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ಯುರೋಪ್ನಲ್ಲಿ 50% ಅಷ್ಟು ಕೂಡ ಸಬ್ಸಿಡಿ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಸಿಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ಆದರೆ ಭಾರತದಲ್ಲಿ ಸಿಗ್ತಾ ಇರೋದು ನಗಣ್ಯ. ಇದನ್ನು ಊಹಿಸೋಕ್ಕೂ ಸಾಧ್ಯ ಆಗಲ್ಲ, ಇಷ್ಟು ದೊಡ್ಡ ಪರ್ಸೆಂಟ್ ನಮಗೆ ಸಬ್ಸಿಡಿ ಸಿಗುತ್ತಾ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು. ಮತ್ತು ನಮ್ಮ ದೇಶದಲ್ಲಿ ಅತಿ ಸಣ್ಣ ರೈತರಿರುವಂಥದ್ದು 86% ಅತಿ ಸಣ್ಣ ರೈತರಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಆದರೆ ಅಮೆರಿಕದಲ್ಲಿ ಒಬ್ಬ ರೈತರಿಗೆ ಸರಾಸರಿ ಭೂಮಿ ಇದೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ, ಇರೋದೇ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಮಟ್ಟದಲ್ಲಿ, ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ಭೂಮಿ ಇದೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ 440 ಎಕರೆ, 440 ಎಕರೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ಇಷ್ಟು ಅಂದರೆ ಅಮೆರಿಕದಲ್ಲಿರ್ಬೋದು, ಯುರೋಪಲ್ಲಿರಬಹುದು, ಅವರಿಗೆ ನಾವು ಅಲ್ಲಿರೋವಂಥ ಕೃಷಿಕರು ಕೂಡ ಸಣ್ಣ ಪ್ರಮಾಣದಲ್ಲಿದ್ದರೂ ಕೂಡ ಆತ್ಮಹತ್ಯೆಗಳು ಅಲ್ಲೂ ಕೂಡ ನಡೀತಾ ಇದೆ. ಅಂದರೆ ಅಲ್ಲಿರೋರು ಕೂಡ ತುಂಬ ಕಷ್ಟದಲ್ಲಿ ಬದುಕ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನು ನಾವು ಮಾತಾಡಬೇಕಾಗುತ್ತೆ. ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಲಾಭ ಯಾರು ಪಡಿತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ ಅನ್ನೋ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆಗಳನ್ನ ಕೂಡ ಕೇಳ್ಕೋಬೇಕು. ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ನಾವು ಈ ನೇಚರ್ ಫುಡ್ ಅನ್ನೋ ಒಂದು ಸಂಸ್ಥೆ ಸ್ಟಡಿ ಮಾಡಿದಾಗ ಅವ್ರು ಹೇಳಿದ್ದು, ಈ ಕೃಷಿ ವಲಯದಿಂದ ವಿಶ್ವದಲ್ಲಿ ಏನಾದರೂ ಒಂದು ಇಂಗಾಲದ ಒಂದು ಎಮಿಷನ್ ಆಗ್ತಿದೆ, ಪ್ರದೂಷಣೆ ಆಗ್ತಿದೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ಕೃಷಿ ಕ್ಷೇತ್ರದ ಒಂದು ಪಾತ್ರ 34% ಅಷ್ಟು. ಇದು ಯಾಕೆ ಆಗ್ತಿದೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ಬಳಸುವಂಥ ನಾವು ಕೆಮಿಕಲ್ಲು, ಪೆಸ್ಟಿಸೈಡ್ಸು ಏನೆಲ್ಲ ಇರ್ಬೋದು ಅವು ಕೂಡ ಇದಕ್ಕೆ ಕಾಂಟ್ರಿಬ್ಯೂಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಿದೆ ಅಂತ. ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ಇಂಥ ಕಾಲಘಟ್ಟದಲ್ಲಿದ್ದಾಗ ನೀವಿಲ್ಲಿ ನೆರೆದು ನೀವು ಇದು ಸಣ್ಣ ಒಂದು ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡ್ತಿದ್ದೀನಿ ಅಂತ ಅನ್ಕೋಬೇಡಿ. ನೀವು ಇಲ್ಲಿರೋರೆಲ್ಲರೂ ಕೂಡ ಇತಿಹಾಸ ಬರಿತಾ ಇದ್ದೀರಾ. ಇದೆಲ್ಲರೂ ಕೂಡ ರೈತರಿಗೆ ಒಂದು ಸ್ವಾತಂತ್ರ್ಯ, ನಿಜವಾದ ಸ್ವಾತಂತ್ರ್ಯ ಸಿಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ಯಾವಾಗ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ಪ್ರತಿ 5 ಕಿಲೋಮೀಟ್ರಲ್ಲಿ ರೆಗ್ಯುಲೇಟೆಡ್ ಮಂಡಿಗಳಿದ್ದಾಗ. ಈಗ ನಮ್ಮ ದೇಶದಲ್ಲಿರೋದು ಕೇವಲ 7,000 ಮಂಡಿಗಳಿದೆ. ಆದರೆ ನಮಗೆ ಬೇಕಾಗಿರೋದು ದೇಶದಲ್ಲಿ 42,000 ರೆಗ್ಯುಲೇಟೆಡ್ ಮಂಡಿಗಳು ಬೇಕಾಗಿರುವಂಥದ್ದು. ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ನಾವು ಸ್ಪೇನ್ ದೇಶದಲ್ಲಿ 2020ರಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ಕಾನೂನು ತರ್ತಾರೆ. ಏನು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ, ಯಾರಾದರೂ ಅಷ್ಟೇ ಉತ್ಪಾದನೆ ವೆಚ್ಚಕ್ಕಿಂತ ಕಡಿಮೆ ಬೆಲೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಕೊಂಡುಕೊಂಡ್ರೆ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಪೆನಾಲ್ಟಿ ಹಾಕ್ತಾರೆ. ಅಂಥ ಕಾನೂನು ವಿಶ್ವದಲ್ಲೆಲ್ಲೆಡೆ ಜಾರಿಯಾಗಬೇಕು. ರೈತರಿಗೆ ಉತ್ಪಾದನೆ ವೆಚ್ಚಕ್ಕಿಂತ ಕಡಿಮೆ ಸಿಗಬಾರ್ದು. ರೈತರಿಗೆ ನಿಜವಾದ ಸ್ವಾತಂತ್ರ್ಯ ಮತ್ತು ರೈತರು ನಿಜವಾದ ಸಂದೇಶ ಏನು ಕೊಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ ಸಮಾಜಕ್ಕೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ, ನಮಗೆ MSP ನಮಗೆ ಹಕ್ಕು, ನಮ್ಮ ಹಕ್ಕು, ಅದಿಲ್ಲದೆ ಬೇರೆ ಯಾವುದು ನಮಗೆ ಒಪ್ಪಿಗೆ ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ ಅನ್ನೋವಂಥ ಒಂದು ವಿಷಯ ಸಂದೇಶವನ್ನು ರೈತರು ಸಾರಿ ಹೇಳಬೇಕು. ಯಾವುದಕ್ಕೂ ಅಂಜಬಾರ್ದು. ನಮಗೊಂದು ಕೋಪ ಇರಬೇಕು. ನಮಗೆ ಯಾವುದು ಅನ್ಯಾಯದ ವಿರುದ್ಧ ಕೋಪ, ನಮ್ಮ ರೈತರಿಗೆ ಆಗ್ತಿರುವಂಥ ಅನ್ಯಾಯದ ವಿರುದ್ಧ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಕೇಳುವಂಥ ಮನಸ್ಥಿತಿ ಇರಬೇಕು. ನಾವು ನಿಜವಾದ ಸ್ವಾತಂತ್ರ್ಯ ಪಡಿಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ನಮಗೆ ಗ್ಯಾರಂಟೀಡ್ ಮಿನಿಮಮ್ ಸಪೋರ್ಟ್ ಪ್ರೈಸ್ ಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನುವ ಸಂದೇಶವನ್ನು ಯಾವಾಗಲೂ ನಾವು ಎತ್ತಿಡಿಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ.
Thank you, Kavita, for that excellent translation. Now I invite Ms. Nandini Jayaram to come. Nandini Jayaram to speak. Thank you.
How many minutes? 15 minutes. Respected Devinder Sharma ji and all the audience here. First of all, my namaskaras to one and all for the great discussions that we are taking and exchanging. Last speaker of the day and very least is left after Devinder Sharma ji's speech. But as a farmer, to put some voice. Many a times I feel like questioning everybody who is in some position as why we farmers are deprived from decent livelihood, decent income. We who work under the sky and irrigate our land in the dark nights, don't we have the right for a decent income? And that too, deprived to what level? To the level of quitting our cultivation, and deprived to that extent that the desperation of the life to commit suicide. See, this is the reward for the hard work which we farmers are getting. Whereas on the other side, since 1965 to 2015, nearly in these 5 decades, the increase in the agriculture production is 3.7 times, whereas increase in the population is 2.55 times. So the net result is we have brought an increase in the production of 45% per person. And today, India is exporting food products. But the irony is, producers are constituting majority of the nation's poor. Is it fair? We have read about inflation in economics. Now we are hearing another new term, food inflation. This is very often used, food inflation. But actually, it is food deflation in the reality. If at all there is food inflation, that is made, that is created for many, many, many reasons. And another new term, Thali economics. Thali here I mean Hindi Thali, not Kannada Thali. But I feel very sad to take the Kannada Thali also in my speech, because we must see the social ramifications when economy has worsened to this level. Our gentle youths who are on farming are not getting a bride to tie thali, Kannada thali. This Hindi thali, which Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman often uses, and she says 45% of the earnings of the people who are nearer to poverty line and who are below poverty line have forced to spend that much of their income. But our great leader, Professor Nanjundaswamy, he had told this in 1980s when GATT was just stepping India and WTO was not in frame. He told that majority of the people of this nation will have to spend more than 70% of their income just for their food. When he had told it in 1980s. And he had also told about the farmer's suicide, which we are seeing today, which we could not understand when he told in those days. Though we understood, we could not digest that fact which we are facing today. This was the effect which I feel how the globally our market started to disturb. And every time I feel when something arises before me, what I can do, what we farmers can do. First, what I feel is we farmers must get committed to such a way that we must produce all the food products by our own. Produce how? Before Green Revolution, we farmers, we made our inputs. There was no input cost. Now it is time to take a U-turn from specialized farming to diversified farming, and integrated farming too. And doing this method of farming, it needs the human resource where we can go for collective farming. There are challenges. I don't say no. But there are possibilities, and today there are many models throughout the country where we can see, because seeing is believing, and we can adopt it too. What we can do, we can talk about the subsidiary occupations like livestock, like agroforestry. You see, India, apart from its fuel wood which is used for fuel, apart from that, this country imports 40% of its wood and wood products, worth nearly 30,000 crores. But extreme legal restrictions, it is discouraging the farmers to go for agroforestry. As a farmer, what I feel is, really, we can't plan for our retired life. It's very hard. How much ever we plan, it will be out of our hand. At least agroforestry, that will be the best plan for our retirement. But government policies are discouraging us. In many issues, I'll feel very much to point my fingers towards the government. Since Green Revolution, governments is encouraging the production. This production-centric approach of the government must be shifted to market-centric approach, where MIS, that is market intervention schemes, go down communities, and as Sharma ji told about the mandis, all this must be the commitment of the government. Commitment of the government with guarantee of the income. Income Guarantee Act, which we need, is very necessary today to save the farmers and the farmers' lives also. And regarding the government's some other steps which I feel very pain to take here is, you see, private and corporate banks are not controlled by the government on one side, and on the other side, the nationalized banks, which were helpful for the farmers, have been gradually keep closed in the rural parts. Here, hundreds of nationalized banks are being closed. You see the steps as in which directions the government is heading. And there is a lot of discussion about MSP, minimum support price. Just announcement of minimum support price doesn't help us without commitment of procurement also. And there is no fairness also in announcement of the MSP. Many a time, we'll be selling our products in the open market at the higher rate of the MSP. For this, I think I can quote from the report of the Karnataka State Agriculture Price Commission of 2017 and 18. The report reads, the cost of production of 1 quintal of onion is 1,093 rupees. Cost of production, 1,093 rupees, according to the report. According to our farmers, we feel it is much more. Okay. And the report says, at the same time, farmers were selling onion in the open market at the rate of 1,253 rupees. Do you know the MSP of those days? 624 rupees. Is there any meaning for the MSP? From the same report, I really want to take another 2 points from the same report, which will help the farmers to have a secured income like. The reports talks about the stabilization fund to procure the farmer's product on one side, and MIP, minimum import price, is also there. And I really thank the Chief Prakash Kamareddy sir and his committee, because this committee had given a note to the Chief Minister of Karnataka to forward that note to Central GST Council, where the note had a picture how GST was a burden to farmers. You must go through that. And I always feel there is a lack and a big gap itself, a big lack also in detecting the women's gap. The women's gap in the ownership, in the access to market, in discrimination. If this is modified to some percent, I think farmers' household economy will also increase. And globally too, Kiran, how many minutes do I have? 2 minutes more. Okay. We should respect everybody's time, no? So globally, actually, this is which much had to be taken into. The United Nations Peasants' Rights defines what? For a decent livelihood, for a decent income of the farming community. But United Nations instruments neither is able to prevent the violation of the peasants' rights, nor it is able successfully and efficiently to promote, to prevent, to promote and to protect, the peasants' rights. You see, trading of food commodities is different from trading of other commodities. Trading of food commodities is importing unemployment to this thickly populated country, importing the insecurity of the food security, importing liberalization. Actually, what the word that which suits here is liberalization. Here is making the food producers to lose the control of the food market. So all this has to be rectified, and our Kiran, while speaking, and even Devinder Sharma ji also addressed some points regarding the situations of the farmers in the developed countries. I'll just quote two within 1 minute. From 1990 to 2015, in European countries like in France, 38% of the farmers have gone from farming. In Spain, 45%. In Belgium, 56%. In Netherlands, 65%. In Germany, 79% of the farmers have moved from farming. And our Karnataka state have brought some changes in the Land Act and all, where it will increase the consolidation of land. I'll just give one example. Bill Gates and Melinda Gates family, one family, it's owning 2,68,000 plus. 2,68,000 plus acres of land in the hands of one family. Boswell family owns 1,50,000 acres of family. And Devinder Sharma ji was telling that urban population must migrate back to the rural part. What will they do by coming back? What type of life or job can they get? What's the solution for all this? Agroecology, which needs human resource, where health of the Mother Earth, where health of the all beings, including human beings, will be protected. Through that, food will not become a weapon to rule this big democratic country. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Nandini Jayaram ji, for that excellent lecture, which really adds a lot of dimensions to what Devinder ji also spoke. And she also reminded us of the farmer suicides at the beginning of our talk, as well as about peasants' rights. I think that farmers committing suicide is the ultimate violation of the basic right to live of the farmers of the country, who are actually feeding the nation. So I think ultimately, in one line, if we can say that the farmers of the country have performed their duty towards the nation by increasing the production. Even in the COVID pandemic, we found that the farmers were the ones who actually sustained the economy. So farmers have performed their duty to the nation over and over again, every year, year after year. But the nation is not keeping up its duty to the farmers, and that is what we want to change. And ensuring income security, economic security to all farm households is something that we have to strongly demand if our nation has to keep its integrity. And when we say all farm households, we mean all the sections which are engaged in agriculture, including Adivasi farmers, including women farmers, tenant farmers, including pastoralists, people who are dependent on livestock, and landless agricultural workers also. And we will deal with some of these issues tomorrow also in the plenary session, where we will talk about various marginalized sections within agriculture. So on that note, we would like to end this session. And before Devinder ji and Nandini ji leave, we would like to release this book which has been prepared. It's a compilation. It's called Shifting Grounds, Professor Shambhu Prasad and Deborah Datta. I request Professor Shambhu Prasad also to come onto the stage so that we can release this book. It's called